Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be going through a really interesting book, Truth is a Lonely Warrior, by James Perloff.
Yeah.
And this book is about hidden agendas and powerful forces that might be shaping world events. So really just kind of diving into some potentially controversial topics, things like war, media manipulation, even secret societies.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about Perloff's work is he doesn't shy away from challenging those conventional narratives. And he really digs deep into history, questioning whether events unfolded the way that we've always been told. Like, is there more to the story than we actually know?
Right. And he doesn't just present these ideas as these abstract theories. He actually digs into specific historical events.
Yes.
And like a really good example of this is Pearl Harbor.
Absolutely.
I mean, we all know about this devastating attack that brought the U.S. into World War II, but Perloff suggests there might be more to this story.
Absolutely. And he specifically points out that the Roberts Commission, which was tasked with investigating the attack, was largely made up of individuals with close ties to the Washington establishment.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And he argues that this raises questions about the investigation's objectivity.
Oh, so there's some potential conflicts of interest there.
Absolutely. Potentially, were there certain truths that those in power just didn't want to be revealed?
Okay, so maybe there's some conflicts of interest with the commission, but what about the actual attack?
So Perloff highlights the fact that certain individuals like Senator Guy Gillette and Congressman Martin Dies actually received information suggesting a potential attack on Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
Before it happened. But according to Perloff, they were instructed to keep this information quiet. So it really begs the question, why wouldn't those in power act on this intel?
Yeah, that's a little unsettling to think about. It almost sounds like he's implying a deliberate cover-up.
It really does.
But why? What would be the motive behind that?
Well, and that's one of the central questions Perloff explores throughout the book, right? Like, what are the motivations of those who he calls the establishment? And he uses this term to describe a network of elite individuals and institutions that, in his view, hold a disproportionate amount of power and influence over global affairs.
Oh, okay, so it's not just about Pearl Harbor.
Right.
It's not just this one specific event. It sounds like he's trying to point to a bigger pattern.
Absolutely. He argues that this establishment has a vested interest in shaping events to serve their own agenda.
Yeah.
And he suggests that war is often a tool used to advance that agenda.
Okay. Interesting. So he then goes on to talk about another historical event, the sinking of the Lusitania.
Yeah.
Now, we've all heard this story, right? This passenger ship being sunk by a German torpedo, and it was a huge tragedy.
Right.
And kind of what led to America's entry into World War I.
Right. Outreached the world.
But Perloff, he points out a detail that's often omitted from a lot of the mainstream accounts of this.
Yeah.
He says this ship was carrying millions of rounds of ammunition and other munitions that were destined for Britain.
Yeah. Millions of rounds.
Millions of rounds of ammunition.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just an innocent passenger ship.
Well, Perloff argues that, yes, while it was carrying civilians, the Lusitania was also a legitimate military target given its cargo.
Okay.
So the presence of these munitions might explain the rapid sinking of the ship, right?
Right.
Because it sank in 18 minutes.
Wow.
And there were reports of multiple explosions, which are often downplayed in a lot of the historical narratives.
It's interesting. It's almost like he's bringing to light these lesser-known details, these like pieces of the puzzle that might change our understanding of how things went down.
It shifts our perspective a little bit.
Yeah. And he does this with several other historical conflicts, too.
Yes.
For example, the Spanish-American War. He kind of highlights, there was this suspicious lack of communication surrounding the deployment of the USS Maine to Cuba, which was the ship whose destruction ultimately started the war.
Yeah. A very pivotal event.
So wait, is he implying that the sinking of the Maine might have been orchestrated to start a war?
He doesn't explicitly state that, but he does raise questions about the motives behind sending the Maine to Cuba in the first place.
Okay.
And he points out that no minutes were kept of the decision to deploy the ship.
Oh, wow.
And that officials in Havana weren't even expecting its arrival. So it leads you to think, was there a deliberate provocation?
Right. So it sounds like he's kind of building this case.
Yeah.
That war is often used as a tool to advance maybe these agendas that aren't obvious to the public.
Absolutely.
But who exactly benefits from these conflicts?
Well, and this leads us back to Perloff's whole concept of the establishment.
Okay.
He argues that this group, which is made up of powerful individuals and institutions, often profits from war, both financially and in terms of expanding their influence, right? And he specifically points to the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, as a key player in this network.
Oh, the CFR. Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
I don't really know too much about them. Who are they?
Well, Perloff traces the roots of the CFR all the way back to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, specifically to a group led by Edward Mandell House, who was a powerful advisor to President Woodrow Wilson. And Perloff claims that this group had a vision for a world order that was controlled by these elite financial interests.
So they were already talking about, like, global governance back then.
According to Perloff, yes. And he even cites documents that were discovered in Lyon, France,
Wow.
that allegedly outline these plans for a world state controlled by these banking groups. And he suggests that the CFR is part of a long-standing effort to achieve this goal.
What about the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group?
Yeah.
I always hear those names thrown around.
Oh, absolutely.
Are they part of this too?
Well, Perloff sees those organizations as part of the same network as the CFR, all working to kind of advance this globalist agenda.
So this establishment,
Yeah.
they sound very powerful.
Yeah.
How do they manage to have so much influence over global events?
Well, Perloff argues that they use a whole variety of tools, including things like financial manipulation, media control, infiltration of key institutions, and actually he dedicates a significant portion of the book to exploring these tools of control.
It sounds like a deep dive within a deep dive. Maybe we should save that for next time.
I think so. We've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
And there's still so much more to explore.
Absolutely.
Wow.
We'll pick this up in part 2 of our deep dive into James Perloff's Truth is a Lonely Warrior.
Yeah.
And it's gonna get really interesting, so stay tuned.
It is. Buckle up.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Truth is a Lonely Warrior.
Yeah.
Last time we got into some of Perloff's ideas about historical manipulation and these hidden agendas behind major conflicts. Now it gets, I think, even more intense as we move into the 21st century. We're going to be looking at how this establishment might be using modern technology to further its goals.
Absolutely. Perloff argues that the digital age has given the establishment these unprecedented tools for control and surveillance. And he actually uses the term cyber tyranny to describe the dangers of a society where every transaction, communication, online activity can be monitored and controlled.
It sounds a little bit like a dystopian sci-fi novel, but I have to admit, the way we rely on technology these days,
right,
it does make you think about, who has access to our information.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Perloff contends that the move towards a cashless society is a key part of this cyber tyranny. Because, think about it, when all of our transactions are electronic,
right,
they leave this digital trail that can be tracked and analyzed. And he suggests that governments and corporations could use this data to monitor spending habits, control access to goods and services, even, identify and suppress dissent.
Yeah, that's a little scary to think about.
Yeah, it's pretty chilling.
What about, like, all the government surveillance programs?
Oh, right.
And software that can track emails, internet activity?
Absolutely. Perloff, he seems particularly concerned about the potential for this technology to be used to target individuals who hold views that challenge the mainstream narrative. So you can almost imagine this society where even expressing dissenting opinions could be deemed dangerous.
Right.
And could lead to surveillance or even persecution.
Perloff then kind of switches gears and goes to an even more controversial topic.
Yeah.
Population control.
Right.
And he suggests that certain powerful individuals and organizations view overpopulation as this threat to their interests and are actively pursuing methods to reduce the number of people on the planet.
He cites individuals like David Rockefeller, Ted Turner, who have publicly expressed concerns about overpopulation. And Perloff kind of suggests that their motives may go beyond just simple environmental concerns. It may be about maintaining control over global resources and power structures.
That's interesting. His most contentious claim in this area, I think, is his suggestion that vaccines could be used as a tool for population control.
Right. And he presents these anecdotal accounts of individuals who believe that they or their children have suffered adverse reactions to vaccines.
Okay.
Now, he does acknowledge that these claims are often dismissed by mainstream science.
Yeah.
But he presents them as evidence that the potential risks of vaccines are not being adequately addressed.
It's important to note that, His views on vaccines are highly controversial and not supported by, the majority of medical professionals.
Oh, absolutely.
He also talks about other methods of population control that have been used, throughout history.
Right.
Forced sterilization, eugenics programs.
Yeah.
And Perloff sees these as these disturbing examples of how, those in power have sought to control and manipulate populations.
Absolutely. And he argues that we need to be vigilant about these practices and make sure that they're not repeated.
Then he moves on to the environmental movement.
Yeah.
And while, he acknowledges that it's important to protect the environment,
of course,
he argues that some elements of the environmental movement have been co-opted by the establishment to advance their own agenda of global control.
Interesting.
He points to the fact that a lot of these large environmental organizations receive funding from powerful foundations and corporations.
Right.
And he suggests that, this funding might come with strings attached, influencing their agenda and priorities.
Absolutely. And he also sees this connection between the push for global governance and environmentalism.
Okay.
So he argues that certain environmental crises, whether real or manufactured, could be used to justify the need for this centralized world government, right? One that has the authority to regulate resource allocation and impose global policies.
So this push for global governance is driven by a desire for just control and power.
That's what Perloff argues. Yeah. And he sees it as a threat to, national sovereignty and individual freedoms.
Okay.
And he also raises concerns about the potential for such a government to be used to suppress dissent and enforce conformity on a global scale.
Next, he delves into the world of secret societies.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, Freemasonry.
Okay.
And he argues that Freemasonry has been infiltrated by the Illuminati,
right?
This secretive group that, he believes is working to establish a new world order.
And he really presents Freemasonry as a tool used by the establishment to recruit and indoctrinate individuals into their ideology.
So there are secret rituals?
Yeah. He describes these secret rituals and oaths that he claims are designed to instill loyalty and obedience to the organization's goals.
And he claims that Freemasons have played a significant role in historical revolutions and political upheavals. He cites examples like the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and suggests that these events were orchestrated, at least in part, by Masonic forces working, behind the scenes.
Right, working in the shadows.
He even ties Freemasonry to the creation of the United States, pointing to Masonic symbols and imagery found on U.S. currency and government buildings, and suggests that the Founding Fathers, many of whom were Freemasons, may have had a hidden agenda in establishing this new nation. Then he gets into this realm of the spiritual, arguing that this battle for control of the world is not just a political or economic struggle. It's a spiritual war between good and evil.
A spiritual war. Interesting.
And he believes that the establishment is ultimately controlled by Satan.
Wow.
And that their goal is to establish this one world government that's ruled by the Antichrist. And Perloff sees this as the ultimate culmination of their plan for global domination. And he actually cites biblical prophecies and historical events to support these claims, suggesting that the world is on the brink of this major transformation that's going to usher in this new era of tyranny and oppression. Perloff even explores the possibility of advanced technology being used to deceive and control the masses.
So mind control kind of stuff.
Yeah. He describes scenarios where holographic projections and really sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques could be used to create this false reality and manipulate people's perceptions. He cites something called the Blue Beam Project.
The Blue Beam Project.
As an example of this type of technology.
Right.
And this theory suggests that NASA could use satellites and holographic projections to create a simulated alien invasion. Or even a second coming of Christ in order to instill fear and obedience in the population. He also examines the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is this controversial document that's often dismissed as anti-Semitic propaganda.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
But Perloff argues that the protocols, regardless of their origin, reveal a blueprint for global domination that's being implemented by, those who are seeking to establish this new world order.
So he's saying it's like a real plan.
Yeah, and he points to specific passages in the protocols that he claims has come true in modern times, suggesting that this document is a genuine plan for world control.
Yeah.
And he sees the protocols as a warning.
Yeah.
To be aware of the tactics and strategies used by, those who are seeking to dominate the world.
Yeah, to kind of see through the illusion.
Right. It's important to note, though, that his views on the protocols are highly controversial.
Right.
And have been widely criticized. But he presents them as evidence of this long-standing conspiracy to manipulate global events and establish a totalitarian world government.
Yeah.
So Perloff's book, it's this whirlwind of historical analysis, conspiracy theories, spiritual warnings. He really paints this bleak picture of a world that's on the verge of succumbing to this really powerful and malevolent force that's trying to enslave humanity.
A very dark view of the future.
It is. It is. But his claims may seem, far-fetched to some.
Sure.
But he presents them with conviction, and he backs them up with all this historical examples and anecdotal evidence.
Yeah. He really does his research.
He does. And, he challenges us to question everything we've been told and consider the possibility that things might not be as they seem.
He really wants us to think for ourselves.
Yeah.
When we come back, we'll explore Perloff's call to action.
Okay.
What he believes individuals can do to resist these forces he describes.
All right. Sounds good.
And we'll also examine, some of the criticisms of his work and offer our own perspectives on his ideas.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Truth is a Lonely Warrior by James Perloff.
Phew. We've covered some pretty heavy stuff,
Yeah. It's a lot to take in.
Some really unsettling ideas. But, Perloff doesn't just leave us with this sense of doom and gloom.
Right.
He actually offers a path forward, a call to action for those who, kind of resonate with this worldview.
Yeah, he really stresses the importance of awareness, like understanding the enemy's tactics,
Okay.
He really encourages readers to become these discerning consumers of information.
Mm-hmm.
Question the narratives presented by mainstream media and institutions.
Right.
And to seek out those alternative sources of knowledge.
So knowledge is power.
Absolutely, yeah. He seems to be saying that by educating ourselves, we can break free from this manipulation.
And control that he describes. He also emphasizes the importance of spiritual discernment, particularly for, those who identify as Christian. And he sees the current global situation as not just a political or economic struggle, but a spiritual battle between good and evil.
A spiritual war.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And he really urges Christians to strengthen their faith, to be wary of deception, and to resist those forces that seek to undermine traditional values and beliefs.
So it's not enough to just be aware.
Right.
He wants people to actually take action.
Yeah, absolutely. He encourages readers to be active in their resistance. Support alternative media outlets, engage in peaceful protests, speak out against injustice and corruption. He really advocates for individual responsibility and action, urging people to take a stand against this encroaching tyranny he sees emerging.
He also talks about economic independence.
Yeah.
And he criticizes the reliance on debt, especially government debt, which he views as a tool of control. So he's encouraging people to become more financially self-sufficient, reducing their dependence on systems controlled by this, quote, establishment.
Yeah, to kind of break free from that system.
Yeah.
And he suggests exploring alternative economic models, supporting local businesses and communities, and really taking steps to become more self-reliant. So he sees economic empowerment as a key part of resisting these control mechanisms that he describes.
What about personal preparedness?
Oh, yeah. He advocates for that, too.
Oh.
He encourages people to develop these practical skills and knowledge that would be valuable in times of crisis or societal upheaval.
So he's not talking about like a violent revolution or anything like that.
No, he doesn't offer a specific blueprint for revolution.
Okay.
But he makes it clear that he believes complacency is not an option.
Okay.
He urges readers to take action in their own lives, in their communities, to resist the forces that he sees as threatening freedom and individuality.
At the end of the book, he shares this personal anecdote about his own struggles with eczema as a child, which he attributes to vaccines.
Oh, interesting.
It's an interesting choice to end with that because it brings like a personal touch to
Yeah.
his broader arguments.
Right. And by sharing this personal experience, I think he's highlighting the real world consequences of these issues that he's discussing.
It's not just theoretical for him.
Exactly.
It's personal.
Yeah.
So Truth is a Lonely Warrior is a really challenging and controversial book. Perloff's claims are bold. His worldview is unconventional, and his writing style is very direct and uncompromising.
Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches.
He doesn't.
But, I think whether readers agree with everything he presents or not,
Right.
his work serves as a potent reminder of the importance of critical thinking, questioning authority, and seeking truth from multiple perspectives.
He wants us to keep those minds open.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, whether you embrace his conclusions or not, Perloff's book encourages us to really engage more deeply with the world around us,
Right.
to challenge the narratives we're given, and to consider that, things might not be as they seem.
Right, there might be more to the story.
Absolutely.
And he leaves us with a real sense of urgency, a call to awareness and action in a world that he sees as, increasingly controlled and manipulated. I think Perloff's message is clear. The truth might be a lonely warrior, but it's a warrior worth fighting for.
Well, that's our deep dive into Truth is a Lonely Warrior by James Perloff.
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey. I hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit challenging. Remember, the search for truth is an ongoing process.
It is.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those minds open.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy diving.